I've always wondered what would happen if giant robot fish monsters invaded, and Darius Twin on Super Nintendo makes that dream a reality for me. Okay, so I know shoot 'em up fans don't exactly hold Darius Twin up there in the highest ranks of SNES space shooters, but hear me out on this one. This game is actually one of my favorite Super Nintendo memories and a bit of a guilty pleasure for me. When I first got a Super Nintendo, the only game I had, of course, was Super Mario World, and naturally, I played the crap out of that game for weeks on end. Then when I finally got a chance to rent my first Super Nintendo game, it was awesome because there was a whole new library of potential rentals to choose from at the local movie rental place instead of all the NES rentals that I'd picked through over the years. Unfortunately though, a lot of the Super Nintendo titles had been rented since the system was still so new and popular, so even though there were tons of boxes up on the shelves, there weren't a lot of games that were available for rent at the moment. In comes Darius Twin, or Darius, a somewhat unassuming game box, but hey, it's a Super Nintendo game, so it's gotta be cool, right? I went home with Darius Twin, and I think the other game might have been Rusty's Super Funhouse? Yeah, Bart's Nightmare and Contra 3 were both out, so that's what I got stuck with. Anyway, I popped in Darius Twin and found it to just be a really fun and simple space shooter. I was never all that good at space shooters. Little kid me was downright terrible at Gradius on the NES, but there was something different about Darius Twin. For starters, this game just runs really smooth. When you compare this to other Super NES space shooters, it would be really easy to say the graphics appear to be a bit drab, the backgrounds aren't necessarily anything special, and while all this mechanized seafood flying around screen is richly detailed, the colors are a bit muted compared to some other Super NES titles. But the trade-off in graphics leaves you with a 16-bit space shooter that just runs solid on the limited hardware of the Super Nintendo. There's not much chugging or slowdown to speak of at all. I was also a big fan of the game's power-up system. It's not unlike other space shooters. A formation of cubes show up on screen, and if you shoot all 6 of them, it drops one of 5 potential power-ups ranging from primary or secondary weapons upgrades, shields, or a detonator that destroys everything on screen. You have no control over what drops, and specifically, you have no control over what weapon systems get upgraded next. In other space shooters, the player has more granular control over your power-ups. You can choose to upgrade your ship speed, shields, missiles, or your main laser gun using some sort of menu, but in Darius Twin, you just grab the power-up and keep going without having to worry about it, and I think I actually prefer that. I guess maybe it's an OCD thing, but I always hated having to choose. I'd be worried I'd pick the wrong thing and have to start over or something. Or I'd just fat finger it and end up powering up my ship's speed too much to where I'm careening wildly all over the screen. Critics of this game will cite the power-up system as one of its faults though, in that it almost becomes too overpowered by the time you get to some of the later levels. But my response to that would be you actually need it to be a bit overpowered, especially by the time you get to the final level where there's a whole slew of mini-bosses all on screen at once, and this part is super challenging even on easy mode. There's also random enemies that just pop in from the rear of the screen with no warning, so it can be pretty easy to burn through all of your lives quickly if you're not careful. Thankfully, this game is pretty generous though, because when you die, you just pick up where you left off in the level instead of having to start back from the beginning. You also get to keep all of your ship's upgrades instead of having to start over with the pea shooter again. So yeah, I just like the power-up system a lot. Okay, so just about everything up to this point about Darius Twin may seem a little unremarkable. So what made it so special for me? Well, like I said before, the game is just easy to pick up and play. It's not like other space shooters that usually leave me annoyed as heck. I can just pop this in and start playing without any hassle. But also, the music. The game's soundtrack has some fantastic tunes, especially the level 1 theme. It's admittedly a bit of an uneven set list, and some of the tracks are less than stellar compared to others, but I still just like it a lot. I don't know. The game's music always stuck with me. Darius Twin, along with most of the series, was composed by Hisayoshi Agura, and it's just a cool mix of electronica and digitized guitar sounds that just, I don't know. Maybe it's because I just didn't have much else to compare it to at the time on Super Nintendo, but it worked for me. There was a Super NES sequel to this game called Darius Force in Japan, and it was released in North America as Supernova. I found a copy of Darius Twin for like $10 at a used game shop, although I think the sequel goes for maybe double that, and I believe they released this as part of the Darius Cosmic Collection on the Nintendo Switch in Japan, but I'm not sure if there are any other digital releases on modern consoles at this time. However, if you're just looking for a simple, cheap SNES space shooter that's easy to pick up and play and has a cool soundtrack, give Darius Twin a shot. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.